are set to fast-track cultural change within AgResearch and strengthen its commercialisation capability, whilst increasing revenue and deal flow along the way. Our next guest is a lawyer by trade, but a commercialisation champion at heart, vigorously working to apply a lean startup mindset to one of New Zealand's largest Crown Research institutes, AgResearch. Now, joining us now, she is a finalist in the 2020 KiwiNet Research Commercialisation Awards for making an outstanding contribution to commercialising public-funded research. And Brooke Marshall is with us. Congratulations, Brooke. This is a very prestigious award. It must be a real honour.
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Sarah. Look, I'm absolutely delighted to be sort of mentioned in the same breath as people like Sue Muggleston and Ian Boddy, who are my co-finalists. But yeah, it's a real honour to be recognised for the hard work that my team and I have been putting in over the last couple of years.
Must have been an interesting cultural change, as we said there in the introduction, coming from a legal background into a science community. What was AgResearch like when you walked into this role as a commercialisation manager, and particularly around royalties and licensing and of research at the time?
So you're right, it is really, really different to private practice in a law firm. And so I did spend about a decade in private practice as a commercial lawyer, and I specialised in IP. So when I came into AgResearch, I guess I had a very sort of legal lens and an intellectual property lens. And so one of the things that I was really keen to achieve was to understand where the intellectual property was sitting in the organisation. Was there anything sort of still in the pantry that we hadn't taken out to market yet? And how could we make that transition from intellectual property or research outcomes just sitting on a shelf and actually making a real impact in the real world?
And a considerable amount of work that you have done, 349%. Of research you've been able to turn into a form of licensing income within your first year. So there was a few things in the pantry.
Yeah, there were. And I guess I think that's a consequence of being able to identify, I guess, the low-hanging fruit. The thing about commercialisation of publicly funded research is a lot of it is really deep technology. It can take 10 or 15 years from the research outcome to actually being usable in market. So a lot of the things that I was working with had been developed a decade earlier, and now their time had come. So I was really fortunate in that respect.
What is it like at the start when there is funding going into a particular piece of research? Early on in the day, the Crown is sort of like, let's just see where you go with this, and then if it's of interest, we'll work out how to commercialise. Has that environment changed now? Do we need to have partnerships earlier on within the concept of the research?
Yeah, look, my understanding is that for every piece of publicly funded research, there is an implementation pathway that is a key component of that research application. So scientists are thinking about how can this piece of research make that transition into a real-world application really early. But I do think you're right, Sarah. I think there is an opportunity for our industry partners to engage earlier and deeper in some of these propositions, but they are quite risky. A large part of the work that we do within AgResearch is what we consider H3 research, which is Horizon 3. It's quite far off having an actual real-world application. So part of my job is to help de-risk some of that riskier research so that it can be taken up in market.
How do you do that?
Well, often it's taking something that's been proven in a laboratory and getting it tested in the field. So there are steps that you can take to try and progress a piece of research from almost conceptual or just one initial result into validating that result a few times to prove that it has legs, getting it to work in a real world environment to check that it's robust, and then identifying where in a market a piece of research could sit. Sometimes with some of our research, it's difficult to find an obvious place in the market if it is more speculative, blue skies thinking. But there are no right answers when it comes to commercialisation. Often what you find is the best strategy is to protect the intellectual property that you uncover and then see how it develops over time.
What's your strategy to building a culture with these scientists? Because a lot of them, no doubt, are passion projects and they don't really like letting go of their baby. But of course they have to turn a dime.
Yeah, look, that's true. And they do often say in the commercialisation profession, a big part of it is drowning puppies, if that's not too harsh a term. But the hardest part is when you sort of talk to a researcher and say, look, I know you love your idea, but I just can't see a space in the market for this. I can't see an opportunity that's going to be generating revenue or being particularly useful. I think one of the biggest barriers to overcome walking into a research organisation without a PhD in my back pocket and without a science background is gaining that mutual respect from our researchers. I am just in awe every day of the astonishing creativity and innovation that our researchers are coming up with. I feel very privileged to be exposed to that kind of thinking. I see it as my job to support those ideas and take them from a concept into a real-world application.
You said that you were a decade in private practice and specialising in intellectual property. As Kiwis, as a culture, and the way that we're so open and honest and sharing, is it to our detriment globally?
Yeah. To be fair, yeah, it is. And I think that we are, by global standards, I think we've been recorded as being one of the most trusting cultures in the world. So we tend to enter business arrangements with a very high level of trust that isn't necessarily reciprocated with international partners, perhaps. But we also talk, we are highly collaborative, and we do talk very freely, both within our own institutions and with our business connections. And that can sometimes harm our intellectual property position. And that can mean it's really difficult sometimes for us to protect our research ideas well enough to provide a competitive advantage that somebody can pick up in the future.
I can imagine you being sort of bad cop in those conversations. Oh, if it was for me, but I've got Brooke and we have to keep her happy.
Oh, look, one of the things that we have done over the last couple of years is we've implemented kind of an IP 101 education program. Intellectual property isn't something that our researchers necessarily learn as they go through their programs, even at the advanced degree levels, but it's an essential skill for operating, I think, in a CRI where we are tasked with generating revenue and we are tasked with providing those benefits to our industry partners. So we implemented an IP 101 program within the organisation to try and raise the level of awareness about what intellectual property is and why fundamentally confidentiality is a cornerstone of everything we do.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on being made a finalist in this particular category in the KiwiNet Research Commercialisation Awards. It's very prestigious and a fantastic opportunity to celebrate the direction we're moving with science and business communities coming together. So it's very exciting. I'll look forward to seeing how it all unfolds, Brooke. And I think there's a longer conversation that we could have again. So I'd love to have you back on the show.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. That's Brooke Marshall. She's the Commercialisation Manager at AgResearch after a decade as a lawyer, IP lawyer. This is Sarah's Country.